Hello, everyone. Tonight we're stepping into something quiet but sharp. A porch light flickering in the distance. The weight of an untouched breakfast. The moment you realize the people you love most might be rewriting your story without asking your permission. You might not survive this story without blinking hard at least once. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from anywhere unusual, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now turn off the lights, maybe get a fan going for some soft noise, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. Before you judge me, let me tell you how I got here. My name's Elaine Harper. I'm 62 years old, born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, where the neighborhood trees are taller than the grocery store signs, and people still wave when they back out of the driveway. I raised my son here. Every scraped knee, every missed curfew, every box of mac and cheese eaten on a Tuesday night because I couldn't afford anything fancier, we lived it all here. Derek, my only child. He used to call me Mama in the middle of the night after a bad dream, his voice just a whisper. I gave that boy everything I had, and on my 62nd birthday, I woke up alone. Not sad exactly, just expectant. You know that strange flutter you feel when you let yourself believe something good is coming? That was me. I even made pancakes. Blueberry, his favorite. Set the table with 2 plates. Wore my nicest sweater, the one with the tiny pearl buttons I re-sewed last fall. I curled my hair, just enough to feel polished, not fussy. I looked in the mirror and smiled at myself like someone rehearsing hope. By noon, nothing. Not a call. Not even a sorry mom works crazy. Just me, and the clock ticking so loudly, I started to feel embarrassed in my own house. Then at 2:17 p.m., yes, I remember the time exactly the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there he was. Derek. My Derek. That same boyish grin he wore in middle school whenever he wanted extra allowance. He held a plastic-wrapped bouquet, gas station flowers by the looks of it, wilted at the edges. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, voice bright but tight. I smiled through it. That little pinch in my chest, I ignored it. I pulled him in for a hug and told myself this was fine. Love is about grace, right? "You came," I whispered. "Of course," he said, patting my back like I was a polite acquaintance. "Get dressed. I made lunch reservations." I didn't ask questions. I didn't press. I grabbed my coat, slipped into those taupe flats that always pinched, but looked cute, and followed him to the car. He didn't drive toward the city. Not toward any of the places I imagined he might have picked. We passed restaurants, diners, even the little spot on 5th we used to go to after church. Instead, we turned onto a long curved drive lined with ash gold maple trees. The leaves fluttered down like confetti someone forgot to sweep up. That's when I saw the sign, Willow Creek Senior Living Center. "Derek," I said, quiet. "What is this?" He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk." The words that follow, "we need to talk," never come with cake. "You notice that?" He parked. "This isn't safe anymore," he said, voice flat like he was reading a script. "You live alone. You've been forgetting things." What memory lapses I snapped louder than I meant to. He looked away, jaw clenched. "I found a great place. You'll have people your age, lots of activities, no more cooking for yourself." I laughed, bitter, loud, laughter that didn't sound like mine. "You brought me here, on my birthday." He opened the trunk. And there it was, my suitcase, already packed. I stared frozen. He'd gone through my things, my drawers, my closet, my private life. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said gently. I didn't move. Inside Willow Creek, the world smelled like bleach and boiled potatoes. Reception smiled too wide. A woman named Shelley asked if I wanted a welcome tour. I felt like I was underwater watching someone else's life unfold. Derek handed her a folder. I caught a glimpse power of attorney signed last month. My name, his signature. He'd already decided. I was already gone. They took me to a room that looked like every hospital you've ever tried to forget. Beige walls, a bed that adjusted with a plastic remote, a single window overlooking a brick wall, my birthday gift, I sat on the edge of the mattress, still in my coat, and felt cold seep into my spine. The kind of cold you don't shake with blankets. No cake, no candles, no second plate of pancakes. Just a paper tag on the door, Elaine H. Room 109. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay still while the hallway buzzed with shift changes and infomercials playing somewhere down the hall. The sheets smelled like bleach. The mattress was too firm. My heart ached with a quiet so deep I thought it might echo. I thought of all the times I bailed Derek out, covered his bills, drove to pick him up when his car broke down, wrote job references when I knew he'd been fired, not laid off. I thought love meant giving until it hurt. But that night, something cracked. A soft hairline fracture that ran right through the middle of what used to be unconditional. And I told myself if I ever got out of here, I wouldn't come back the same. The morning after my birthday, I sat by the window in room 109 staring out at the brick wall like it might suddenly shift and offer me a view. A tree, a sky, a way out. The hallway smelled like overcooked eggs and old magazines. A TV down the hall blared a soap opera I used to watch, but here the drama felt closer than the screen. I asked the morning nurse for my phone. She gave me that soft practice smile that usually comes right before bad news. "Your son said he'd handle it," she replied, tucking the chart under her arm. "He said the phone just caused confusion." I blinked. "He disabled my number." She paused. "I believe so, Ms. Harper. He said you wouldn't be needing it anymore." That was when I stopped feeling sad. That was when I realized I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased. I didn't eat that day, not because I was staging some kind of protest, but because food just didn't make sense. My stomach was a clenched fist and my mind couldn't stop replaying it, Derek's voice saying, "You'll have activities," as if a morning yoga class could replace autonomy. They called me sweetheart. They said, "Let's get you tucked in like I was 10 again, or 100. Nobody asked what I did before, that I used to be a paralegal, that I loved puzzles and garlic knots and obscure jazz records, that I raised a son alone on a receptionist's salary and dignity. They saw gray hair and a birth date and decided the rest didn't matter. I kept to myself, tried to stay sharp. I did the crossword puzzles they left in the hallway, finished them faster than most. I reread an old mystery novel for the 3rd time. I watched the news on mute in the common room just to prove to myself I could still follow what was happening in the world. But the silence in my chest kept growing. My roommate, Marla, snored like a truck and spoke only in pieces. She had a daughter who hadn't visited in years. I listened, because I understood the ache of absence too well. It was the kind of hurt that gets louder the longer you pretend it doesn't. Then on the 4th day, everything changed. That morning, a new face entered room 109. She wore blue scrubs and black sneakers with pink laces. Her braids were pinned up into a swirl under her cap, and her eyes had that rare kind of brightness you don't learn from nursing school. "Morning, Ms. Harper. I'm Naomi. Just filling in today." She took my blood pressure with quiet hands, humming something under her breath, something familiar, maybe Stevie Wonder or Nina Simone. I liked her immediately. Then she said it. "You don't belong here." I flinched. "Excuse me?" Naomi glanced around the room, then smiled. "No offense, I mean a lot of folks do. And that's okay, but you don't seem lost." Something in my throat tightened. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to say that, to see that. I didn't cry, not then, but I did ask her to sit. We talked. About Derek, about the things I didn't say during intake, about how being treated like furniture chips away at you in ways you can't explain. Naomi listened not the way people usually do with polite nods and glazed eyes, but really listened. She made eye contact. She didn't interrupt. She didn't explain my feelings back to me. She let them sit in the air like they belonged. That afternoon, she came back. I was reading in bed, same 3 pages I'd read for an hour. She knocked once, peeked in, and said I found something. In her hand was a folded piece of paper. "What is it?" I asked. "Belonged to Mr. Henley. He passed away last week. We found it inside his Bible, tucked between Psalms and a grocery list." She handed it to me. It was a lottery ticket, yellowed at the edges, dated 2 weeks ago. I snorted. "You want me to try my luck?" Naomi winked. "Hey, stranger things have happened, and the world owes you something. I didn't plan to check it. Not really. But boredom and desperation are strange bedfellows. That night, after the hallway settled and the click of shoes had faded, I shuffled down to the lounge. One of the facility desktops sat dusty in the corner, whirring louder than a plane engine. I pulled up the Ohio State Lottery page, typed in the numbers. My hand froze. My breath left my body like someone had punched it out. I checked the screen again. 14.6 million. I covered my mouth with both hands, looking around like someone might jump out and yell. Just kidding. The room was empty. No joy, no scream. Just this low electric fear curling down my spine. What if Derek found out? What if anyone found out? I printed the confirmation, folded it into fourths, and tucked it inside my bra like a secret I wasn't ready to name. The next morning, I waited for Naomi by the window. When she appeared, I waved her in. I need help, I whispered. I need to talk to someone, privately, legal. She didn't ask why. She just nodded. Naomi knew someone, an attorney who volunteered here twice a month. Wills, healthcare proxies, quiet work no one claps for. He'd be back Friday. So I waited, barely breathing. And for the first time since Derek left me here, I felt something bloom inside me. Not hope exactly. Something sharper, something louder. A voice I hadn't heard in years whispering from deep down inside. You're not done yet. The attorney's name was Caleb Monroe. He was young, maybe mid-30s, with sleeves rolled neatly to the elbow and a leather briefcase that looked older than both of us. Naomi introduced us in the staff break room, which smelled like reheated fish and burnt coffee. But Caleb didn't seem bothered. He shook my hand firmly, made eye contact, and said, Naomi told me you're dealing with something sensitive. I'm happy to help however I can. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I reached into the inside of my cardigan, right over my heart, and pulled out the folded printout I'd kept hidden there for 3 days. This is a confirmation, I said, voice, shaking just a little. Of a lottery ticket. It belonged to a man here who passed. It's in my possession now. Caleb read it once. Then again. His eyebrows lifted, but he didn't say wow or are you sure, like some people might. He simply nodded. I see. And what do you want to do? I swallowed hard. I want to disappear. He didn't flinch, just leaned forward and said, all right, then we'll need to move fast. That moment right there, that's when I knew I'd found the right person. The next 48 hours passed like a dream. You wake up sweating from half real, half smoke. Caleb came back the next day with folders. Actual folders, not just digital files. The man knew how to paper trail. He walked me through it, establishing a blind trust under a legal alias, transferring the winnings into accounts I wouldn't be directly linked to, assigning Caleb as temporary trustee, creating a new will, leaving everything to charities I'd name later. Everything will be airtight, he said. If anyone tries to come after this, they won't find a crack to crawl through. I nodded. Because here's what you need to know about having money after having nothing for so long. It doesn't feel like power. Not at first. It feels like exposure. Like you're suddenly walking around with a target strapped to your back. Especially when someone like Derek is watching. Naomi helped me pack. I didn't own much, just a few sweaters, my mother's rosary beads, a box of old birthday cards, and my late husband's silver watch. She folded each item with such care it made me ache. I'm not crying, I said, dabbing my eyes with the inside of my sleeve. Me neither, she replied, sniffling anyway. Before I left, Naomi slipped something into my bag, a tiny Polaroid of us, standing in front of room 109. She'd snapped it earlier that morning. We looked like survivors, and maybe we were. I left Willow Creek just before sunrise. No goodbye to the staff, no discharge celebration, no signature on the way out. Just me in a borrowed coat slipping into Caleb's car with a duffel bag and a plan. The city was still sleeping when we hit the freeway. Streetlights blinked past like sentries and I didn't look back. I couldn't. Not at that place. Not at who I'd been inside it. We drove for hours. By the time we crossed the state line into Kentucky, the sun had started to bleed over the horizon, painting the sky in stripes of pink and ash blue. I stared out the window, letting it all sink in. Every turn of the tires was a step farther from what Derek had done. He'd taken my independence, my phone, my bank account, and told the world I was fading. He made me a non-person. a soft problem to be solved behind closed doors. But now I was a ghost with $14 million. Let him try to find me. Caleb had purchased a small house under the trust's name. Not fancy, nothing with columns or gates. A one-story brick place tucked at the edge of rural Tennessee. A crooked mailbox, a gravel driveway, and just enough trees to keep neighbors at bay. The kind of place that doesn't ask questions when a woman shows up alone with nothing but a single bag and silence in her eyes. We pulled up just past noon. "Here we are," Caleb said, shifting the car into park. It wasn't beautiful, but it was mine. I stepped out, gravel crunching beneath my sensible shoes, and just breathed. The air smelled like pine and faraway rain. No antiseptic, no television static, just the quiet hum of countryside. Inside the house had been pre-stocked with basics, groceries, toiletries, an old armchair that looked like it had seen more lives than mine. There was a working heater, clean water, and a deadbolt that locked from the inside. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from relief. I made tea in the little yellow kitchen and sat by the window watching the stars settle in like old friends. My hands curled around the mug. I still felt the weight of betrayal in my bones. But beneath that, something else. A soft hum. A beginning. I pulled out the Polaroid Naomi gave me and set it on the windowsill. I wasn't alone anymore. I had truth. I had the law. I had a house. And even if I had no one left to trust, I had me. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called from the trees. It sounded like a warning, but I didn't flinch, because the woman who left Willow Creek was gone. And the one sitting here, she was ready. The early days in Tennessee passed like mist, slow, quiet, hard to hold on to. I kept the house dark at night, not because I was scared, but because it felt safer not to be seen. I moved carefully like a guest in someone else's life. Every drawer I opened, every cabinet I stocked felt like I was borrowing time. But time kept going. Each morning I woke early and stood at the back door just to remind myself the world still existed. The wind through the pine trees had a low whistle like it was trying to say something, but wasn't quite sure how. Some mornings I answered it. Just a soft, tired, "I'm still here." I started settling in, slowly. Caleb checked in regularly, but never too much. We kept our calls brief, secure. I paid in cash, burned receipts, used prepaid phones and VPNs like I was in some low-budget thriller. The thing is, I used to roll my eyes at people who talked like this, like the world was watching, like they had something to hide. Now I knew better. When you become an inconvenience, people don't care how they tidy you away. And Derek, he had been planning to erase me long before the birthday drive to Willow Creek. I realized that the day I finally went through my old tablet, it had been tucked into the side pocket of my duffel bag, dead battery and all. I charged it out of curiosity, half hoping I'd find some old recipe or bookmarked poem. What I found instead? A bank app I hadn't opened in months. 2 transactions, just days before Derek dropped me off. One, a $3,000 emergency home repair. 2, a $1 and $200 bridal brunch reservation at a downtown Dayton restaurant. Both charged to my account, neither with my permission, and both with the same note in the payment memo handled via POA. I sat on the worn couch and stared at the screen for so long the tablet dimmed itself. That's when it hit me. Derek hadn't just made a decision for me. He'd made a decision about me. He decided I was no longer worth consulting. He wanted me small, compliant, and out of the way. I opened the browser and searched for his name. Took me 3 tries to type it correctly. My hands were shaking that hard. His social media was still active. Too active. There he was, front and center in every post, polished, smiling, preaching about family and responsibility. Like he hadn't just abandoned his mother at a facility and looted her bank account on the way out. One post caught my breath. It was dated 2 days ago. If anyone's seen my mother, Elaine Harper, please contact the Dayton police. We're worried for her safety. She's been struggling lately, and we just want to bring her home. There were over 100 comments. People praising him for being a good son, praying for my safe return, offering casseroles and theories. One person even said my grandma went through something like this. Dementia is so hard. I closed the screen. Hard. There's something almost funny about watching strangers write your obituary before you're even cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. The heater buzzed in the background. The wind rattled the gutter, but my mind was louder. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper and began listing everything I remembered Derek asking for in the past year. Money for dental work, a temporary loan when his wife got laid off, help covering a car payment, something about needing a co-signer. It formed a pattern, a quiet bleed. I chalked it up to hard times. I justified every withdrawal. But now I saw it for what it was, a long, slow conditioning, so that when he packed my suitcase and drove me to Willow Creek, it felt like the next step, not the final blow. And I had let him. Because a mother's love makes you excuse things that should never be excused. I took a deep breath and opened the envelope Caleb left me before he drove back to Dayton. Inside were legal forms, the trust, the POA revocation, a new will, and a burner number just for emergencies. I texted him. "I think there's more." He replied within the hour. "Want me to come down?" I stared at the message, then typed, "Not yet. I need to look deeper first." The next day, I did something reckless. I signed up for an online background check service, entered Derek's name, birth date, last known address. Then I waited. 15 minutes later, the report appeared. It was longer than I expected. 3 past due loans, 2 small claims lawsuits, a business venture filed and closed within the same year, multiple credit card delinquencies. Then I saw it, an open investigation for misuse of financial documents. My chest tightened. The description was vague, under review. Allegations of fraudulent use of POA involving elder relative. No name, no formal charges, just smoke. But I knew exactly where that fire had started. I logged out, cleared the browser, and unplugged the Wi-Fi. Not because I thought it would stop him, but because I needed silence to think. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and really looked at myself. Lines deeper than I remembered. Eyes tired but awake in a way they hadn't been in years. I didn't look fragile. I looked ready. So I opened a drawer, pulled out a manila folder, and labeled it in thick black ink. If anything happens to me. Inside, I started collecting everything. Printouts, notes, dates, passwords. I wasn't going to run. Not this time. If Derek wanted to silence me, he'd have to go through the storm I was building. Because what they never tell you about getting older, you don't get weaker. You just get louder in ways that no one expects. 3 days after I labeled that folder, something changed in the air. The kind of shift you can't explain. Just feel like when a storm is coming, but the clouds haven't arrived yet. I spent that morning reorganizing the pantry. It was the most mundane thing in the world, but somehow comforting. Rice beans, peanut butter, alphabetized cans of soup. Maybe it was silly, but after months of being told what I could eat, and when the idea of choosing my own crackers felt downright revolutionary. Afterward, I took my tea out to the porch and sat bundled in an old flannel, watching the trees lean into the wind. That's when I saw it. A car. Black, parked 2 houses down. Unfamiliar. It didn't move. Didn't even turn on its lights. Just sat there, engine off, like it had nowhere else to be. I stared at it for 15 minutes before finally going back inside. I didn't want to be paranoid, but I also wasn't going to be naive. Not anymore. I waited an hour. When I peeked out again, the car was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I double-locked the door, then wedged a chair beneath the handle, just in case. At some point, I started to wonder, what if Derek knew more than I thought? What if the post online wasn't just theater, but bait, to draw me out, or worse, to build a narrative where he was the hero and I was the fragile, confused woman lost in the world? And if that's the story he was selling, what would he do if I didn't play along? The next morning, I opened the fireproof box under the hallway floorboards and took out the lottery ticket. Still crisp, still real. But it didn't feel like luck anymore. It felt like a target. I called Caleb. He answered on the first ring. "Still safe?" he asked. "For now," I said. "But I think it's time." He didn't ask what I meant, just said, "All right, I'm driving down tomorrow." While I waited for him, I wrote a letter to Derek. Not to send, not ever, just to write. Dear Derek, it began, I used to believe that love meant forgiving everything, that being your mother meant covering every sin with excuses. But I was wrong. Love isn't silence, and forgiveness isn't pretending. By the time I finished it, I felt hollow, but it was the clean kind of hollow, like scraping the last bit of rot out of a wound so it can finally heal. Caleb arrived the next afternoon with a new laptop and a small external hard drive. What's all this, I asked. Proof, he said. We're backing up everything. Paper copies can be lost, digital ones, especially encrypted, can follow you anywhere. We spent the next 6 hours building a case. We logged every transaction Derek had made under the old POA, every withdrawal, every loan, every email where he used mom and urgent in the same sentence to justify draining my savings. We printed screenshots of his social media, archived news articles, even tracked IP addresses tied to fake email accounts that had accessed my records. You sure you want to do this? Caleb asked, pausing at the final document, a sworn affidavit, stating I had not given Derek permission to act on my behalf beyond a single medical form 5 years ago, that he had overstepped, that I now believed his actions were criminal. I picked up the pen and signed my name. I'm sure, but we weren't done. Caleb helped me draft a second will. This one left everything to organizations that help people like me, women in transition seniors, facing financial abuse, and one local nonprofit in Dayton that offers legal services to people over 60. We attached a clause that stated clearly, no biological or legal relatives are to receive any portion of the estate. It was bold. It was final. And it was mine. That evening, after Caleb left, I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing something that had been pressing against the inside of my chest for days. My story. Not just the summary, not just the bruises, all of it. From the pancakes I made on my birthday to the brick wall outside room 109 to the moment I realized I'd been buried while still breathing. I didn't know if I'd ever publish it, but I needed to write it. Because I'd spent so long having my life narrated by other people, nurses, doctors, Derek, that I needed to hear my own voice again. The strange thing, it didn't sound angry. It sounded clear. That night, I slept without locking the door, not because I felt safe, but because I'd decided I wouldn't live like a fugitive anymore. The next morning, I sat by the window with a fresh cup of coffee and the breeze sneaking through the screen. That's when I saw it, a letter. Slipped through the mail slot. No return address. I picked it up, heart thumping. The paper was thick, clean, one single sentence written in that familiar impatient scrawl I'd know anywhere. I know what you did. This isn't over. I stared at the words. Then I laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't bitter. It was the sound of someone who'd been underestimated one time too many. Because here's the thing Derek never understood. He tried to silence me, but all he did was give me a story worth telling. The day after that letter arrived, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, just tracing the rim of my coffee mug with one finger. The letter still folded, sat beside me like an unwanted guest. I kept glancing at it, half expecting it to grow teeth and bite. But it didn't scare me. Not like it was supposed to. It confirmed what I already knew. Derek wasn't just watching. He was planning, plotting. Reaching from the corner he'd backed himself into, like a man who suddenly realized his mother wasn't as fragile as he'd hoped. But I had no interest in a war of notes. I had evidence. Caleb had helped me build a firewall of documentation so dense it would take a wrecking ball of lies to break through. What I hadn't told him yet, though, was something I'd found the night before while digging through old emails. It was from Derek's old college roommate, a man named Troy I hadn't thought about in years. The email was from nearly 4 years ago. Subject line, just FYI. The message was short. Hey, Mrs. H. Thought you should know Derek's been opening lines of credit again. Not trying to stir things up, just maybe keep an eye on things. Hope you're doing okay. I never replied. At the time, I told myself it was just a misunderstanding. Boys will be boys. He'd grow out of it. But now I saw it for what it was, a flare shot into the sky ignored. I forwarded the email to Caleb. Subject, more smoke. His reply came fast. That's a matchstick. Let's keep lighting them. Later that afternoon, I bundled up and walked to the tiny post office 3 miles into town. I needed to breathe different air, needed to feel like more than a set of locked doors and digital folders. The woman behind the counter, Bonnie, had kind eyes and a slow southern drawl that made you feel like your bones could melt. "You new around here?" she asked. I smiled but kept it vague, just getting my feet under me. Well, she said stamping my envelope, we like the quiet ones best. Fewer stories, less cleanup. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was honest. Walking back, I noticed a truck idling near the corner. Windows tinted, no plates I could see. Again, that creeping sense like the trees had eyes. I kept walking. Slower, more deliberate. I wanted to turn around to look the driver in the face, but I didn't. I'd learned something important in all this. Don't let them know when you see them. Let them think you're oblivious. Let them underestimate you. When I got home, I locked the door not out of fear, but strategy. I placed the folder marked, "If anything happens to me," directly beneath the front rug in a fireproof envelope. Paranoid maybe, but also prepared. The next few days passed with a kind of thick, silent anticipation, like the air before a thunderstorm breaks. Then, without warning, the courthouse papers came. Not a threat, not a scribbled note. An actual certified envelope from Montgomery County Courthouse, stamped dated and addressed to my Tennessee location, which no one should have known. I opened it with the careful hands of someone defusing a bomb. Inside was a petition. Derek had filed to have me legally declared mentally incapacitated. It was all there, the affidavit, the accusations, the evidence. Statements from 2 people. One, a former neighbor who once watched me lock myself out of the house and call a locksmith. The other, an old coworker of Derek's, who I hadn't seen in over a decade. Both claimed I had shown signs of confusion and deteriorating memory. I laughed. Because this was desperation in print. Derek wasn't just worried, he was spiraling. But what chilled me wasn't the accusations, it was what came next. A request to freeze my bank accounts, to assume control of the trust Caleb had created, to declare me unfit to manage my own finances or my own future. He wanted to disappear me with paperwork, the same way he'd already disappeared me from his life. I called Caleb. He picked up before the first ring finished. "I know," he said. "I got a copy too." His voice was calm, measured. "I've already started drafting our response. We'll request an independent evaluation immediately. And Elaine? Yeah. Do not panic. That's what he wants. You panic, you lose ground." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. That night, I didn't sleep. But it wasn't fear that kept me up. It was fury. I paced my small living room, reciting every date I could remember, every moment that proved my mind was sharp, my choices deliberate. I hadn't disappeared. I had escaped. And Derek wasn't mad because I was confused. He was mad because I was clear. 2 days later, Dr. Rowena Levine arrived. She was the independent psychiatrist Caleb had arranged for my evaluation. Mid-50s, low bun, soft cardigan that smelled faintly of lavender. The kind of woman who makes you want to confess even things you didn't do. We sat at my kitchen table. She asked questions not just about my memory, but my decisions, my emotions, my sense of time and orientation. "Who is the president?" she asked. I answered. "What did you eat yesterday?" "Chicken salad. It was terrible." We both laughed. But then she asked something that caught me off guard. "What would you do if your son showed up here right now?" I paused, then answered honestly. "Offer him coffee, then ask him to leave." She nodded, scribbled something down. 3 hours later, she stood, shook my hand and said, "You're one of the most lucid people I've seen all month. Don't let him take that away from you." I stood at the window after she left, watching her car drive down the long gravel road. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. Because now I had proof, a doctor's voice to match my own. Derek wanted to build a case against me. Fine, but I was building something too. And I wasn't using lies. I was using truth. And brick by brick, it was becoming a fortress. 2 weeks. That's how long the judge gave us. 14 days to prepare for the hearing that could determine whether I was considered legally capable of making my own choices or if Derek would succeed in cutting me off from everything I'd rebuilt. It felt absurd. I sat at my own table, poured my own coffee, reviewed my own paperwork, and still a court needed to decide if I was allowed to live my own life. Aaron, yes, I started calling Caleb by his real name, now came back down from Dayton the next day. He brought 2 briefcases and a weary smile. Your case is strong, he told me. It won't be easy for them to spin it. Not with the evaluation, not with what we've documented. But we both knew that in court, truth doesn't always shout louder than narrative. And Derek had been curating a narrative for years. The good son, the dutiful caretaker, the man who, poor thing, was only trying to save his confused, aging mother from herself. The media had picked up just enough of the story to be dangerous. There were whispers online, forums, social media posts, speculation. They didn't know my name, but they knew the outlines. Older woman disappears. Money involved. Son claims manipulation. It's funny how quickly strangers pick sides based on a headline. But I wasn't going to live in their story. I was going to tell my own. Aaron and I spent nearly every hour of those 2 weeks preparing. We assembled binders, made timelines, backed up digital evidence, and made a list of witnesses. Naomi was one of them. She'd agreed to testify about the day I left Willow Creek and how coherent I'd been. "I'll drive up myself," she said over the phone. "I don't care what it takes. You weren't confused. You were cornered." I thanked her, and I meant it. It's strange the way kindness sticks in your throat when you've gone so long without it, like your body forgets how to swallow it whole. Aaron also contacted Dr. Levine. She'd written a full report signed and sealed, but agreed to appear in person if needed. "No one's discrediting my name for a man who thinks elder care means cashing checks," she said flatly. A small smile crept up my face when Aaron relayed that. By the 5th day of preparation, I noticed the quiet was heavier than usual. Derek hadn't made any new public statements, no new news features, no heartfelt Facebook updates, not even a vague quote about resilience in the face of family tragedy, which could only mean one thing. He was planning something. Sure enough, the next morning, Aaron forwarded me a copy of a motion Derek's lawyer had filed. He wanted to introduce audio clips into the hearing. Clips of me. Voicemails I'd left over the past year, rambling messages I barely remembered where I was venting or tired or talking too fast, strung together out of context to sound unstable, like someone who didn't know which day of the week it was. I played them. He'd edited the clips, snipped out the greetings, removed the responses, cropped every recording to leave only confusion in its place. It was clever, cruel, and completely fake. "This is character assassination," Aaron muttered, setting the tablet down. "But it's common. Paint you as unstable and make the court too nervous to give you your rights back." I stared at the screen a long time before I spoke. "Then we remind them who I am." Aaron raised an eyebrow. I pulled out a notebook. Inside was a single photo, one I hadn't looked at in years. Derek, age 9, holding up a hand-drawn birthday card he made for me, to the smartest, bravest mom in the world. I remembered that day, not because of the card, but because I'd worked a double shift at the medical office and still came home in time to bake his favorite cake from scratch. I'd done so much for that boy, loved him so thoroughly, so consistently, it had felt like breathing. And now, he was trying to turn that love into ammunition. "No more," I whispered. Aaron sat across from me, silent. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated, then slid a document across the table. A copy of Derek's financial records, recent ones. Not just debts, but transactions that showed large withdrawals from the same account tied to my old trust. Money that he couldn't access anymore. Unless he forged documentation, I said out loud. Aaron nodded grimly. "Which means he's desperate. Desperate enough to gamble on this hearing to gain access again. Or to make me go away altogether," I murmured. The room went quiet, and for the first time I saw it clearly. Derek wasn't just trying to reclaim control. He was trying to erase evidence. Silence the only person who knew the truth. The final straw. That afternoon, I received another letter. No envelope, just a slip of paper left at the edge of my property tucked under a rock near the gate. "Come home quietly, or I make this worse." No signature, no initials, but I didn't need them. I folded the paper slowly, placed it in the manila folder, and turned to Aaron. File the restraining order, I said, and prepare to counter, because I'm not going home. I'm going to court. That night, I sat in the armchair by the fireplace wrapped in the same old blanket I'd brought from Ohio. I let the flames burn low, let the silence settle, and I whispered to the fire, the stars, and to myself, I am not your pawn, Derek. And this time, when the wind pushed against the windows, I didn't flinch. Court day. I woke before the sun made myself oatmeal I couldn't taste, and dressed in a navy blue sweater and gray slacks. Something quiet, something sure. No pearls, no pins, no frills, just fabric that wouldn't shake when I stood. Aaron picked me up in a rental car. He didn't say much, neither did I. There's a kind of silence that grows between two people who've prepared for a storm. Not tension, not dread, just stillness, like wind holding its breath. The courthouse in Dayton hadn't changed. Same chipped steps, same dusty windows. Walking in, I was hit with a smell I remembered from years ago. Carpet cleaner and worn-out air conditioning. It made me feel oddly calm. When we entered the courtroom, Derek was already there. He stood when he saw me out of performance, not respect. His suit was too sharp, his smile too soft. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something with the practiced air of someone who'd studied how to look like a concerned son on camera. And I took my seat like I owned it. The judge, a middle-aged woman with silver hair pinned in a twist, entered and asked both parties to begin. Derek's lawyer went first. Your Honor, he said, voice syrupy and slow, we're here today not to punish but to protect. Mr. Harper is concerned for his mother's well-being. Since her sudden departure, she has exhibited signs of confusion, isolation, and paranoia. Our evidence shows a pattern of behavior that warrants immediate review. Then came the recordings, snippets of my voicemails, me forgetting a time, me repeating myself, me telling Derek to leave me alone in tones that now sounded erratic. But all of it lacked context. When it ended, the judge glanced over at me. Ms. Harper. I rose slowly. Aaron handed me a folder, but I didn't open it yet. I looked directly at the judge, and then at Derek. My name is Elaine Harper, I said evenly, and I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am not in need of rescue. I opened the folder and handed the psychiatric evaluation across to the clerk. This is Dr. Rowena Levine's full report, 3 hours of in-person examination confirming I am mentally sound, emotionally stable, and capable of living independently. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I left of my own will. After my son, I glanced at Derek, placed me in a facility without consent, revoked my phone access, and used my bank account to pay for personal expenses under the guise of power of attorney. The courtroom didn't move. I handed over the second folder. A timeline. Every financial transaction he authorized under my name. Every account opened. Every message sent to banks without my knowledge. The judge raised her eyebrows. Derek shifted in his seat. And here I said pulling out the final document is a restraining order request based on threats I've received since filing to revoke his control. His lawyer stood. Your Honor, these are claims without corroboration. No, I said calmly. These are facts. Dated, signed, notarized. Then Aaron stood. Your Honor, we ask not only that the petition be dismissed, but that Mr. Harper be barred from accessing any future legal action on Ms. Harper's behalf without a full judicial review. The judge sat back. She tapped her pen. Ms. Harper, she said after a long pause, you've presented more than sufficient documentation. I see no evidence of cognitive decline. I see a paper trail of concern not for your health, but for your autonomy. She turned to Derek. Mr. Harper, this petition is denied. You are prohibited from initiating further action without prior approval. Ms. Harper's estate, assets, and decisions are solely under her own control. She banged the gavel. Just once. And just like that, it was over. The courtroom emptied. I didn't speak to Derek. Didn't look at him again. He tried. He stood in the hallway like a statue waiting for a scene. I walked right past, because I didn't need revenge. I had restoration. Back at the house that night, I sat on the porch as the sun fell below the trees. The sky turned syrupy gold. The crickets chirped like a metronome keeping time. My phone buzzed. A message from Naomi. You did it. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I turned my face toward the stars and let the quiet wash over me. Somewhere, Derek was spinning his version of the story. Maybe to his wife, maybe to a lawyer, maybe to no one at all. Let him, because I had the truth, and the truth didn't need defending anymore. Later that evening, I pulled out the letter I'd written Derek weeks earlier, the one I never mailed. I added one sentence to the bottom: "Your story ends where mine begins." Then I burned it, and this time I watched every edge curl into ash. I didn't expect the quiet that followed to feel so heavy. You think when the storm ends, the stillness will feel like relief, but it doesn't. Not right away. It feels like when the power goes out in your house at night, you're grateful it's over, sure, but also startled by how loud silence really is. That week, I didn't hear from Derek. No messages, no letters slipped under the door, no vague threats written in his impatient scrawl. He'd gone dark, which for someone like him wasn't surrender. It was strategy, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I focused on building something new. I contacted Naomi again, not as a witness, but as a partner. I asked her what it would take to set up a small nonprofit, something local rooted in Dayton, where it had all begun, a service for people like me, older adults who'd been overlooked, shuffled, or stripped of their rights under the guise of love. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. We called it the Harper Trust. A little ironic, maybe, using my own last name after everything, but I wanted to reclaim it, make it mean something other than control. We started with small goals, legal workshops, consultations, with a rotating team of attorneys, and a hotline for anyone unsure if what was happening to them was normal. Because here's the truth, no one likes to admit, a lot of people think abuse only counts when it leaves a bruise. But I'd learned differently. Abuse can come wearing a suit and carrying flowers. It can speak gently while slowly siphoning away your name, your money, your control. I hosted our first virtual seminar from my own living room. It felt strange at first seeing my face on the little Zoom box, hearing my voice come through the speakers, but about 10 minutes in, I settled. I told my story. Not the viral version, not the headline-grabbing one, the real one. The pancakes on my birthday, the silence, the suitcase in the trunk, the door with no way out. And how I found the only way forward was through. People listened, really listened. Some turned their cameras off. Shame's a quiet thing, but their messages poured in after. One woman wrote, "I thought I was alone. You made me feel like maybe I'm not crazy." Another simply said, "Thank you for giving me permission to fight back." I didn't cry, but my throat did that tight thing, the kind of ache you get when your body finally realizes it's safe to feel again. Aaron stopped by a few days later with good news. The restraining order is approved, full scope 1 year minimum. He can't call you text, you come within 100 yards. Good, I said, but what about the investigation? He nodded. Still active. But they're moving faster now, your evidence helped. And the money? Safe, he confirmed. The trust is locked. His name's nowhere near it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. It wasn't that I thought Derek would come storming in and demand the money back. He was too careful for that, too slippery. But still, having it protected meant I could stop sleeping with one eye open. That night I lit a candle, not for anyone, not even for myself, just for the stillness. The house glowed in that soft orange light, and for the first time in what felt like years, I took a bath. A real one. Bubbles music, a mystery novel open beside the tub. No knocks at the door. No timelines or to-do lists. Just steam and silence and the faint smell of lavender from a bath bomb Naomi had left on my porch. Afterward, I curled up in my bed, opened the old quilt I brought from Dayton, and ran my fingers along the hand-stitched squares. Some had frayed, others had faded, but it held together. Like me, I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe Derek would try again. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe the investigation would go public. Maybe it wouldn't. But for once, I wasn't planning for disaster. I was planning dinner. Naomi and I were going to host a small meal for some of the other women who'd reached out during the seminar. Nothing fancy, just soup, cornbread, warm lights, and safe space. When I told her the idea, she laughed and said, "You're finally building your table." And I realized she was right. For decades, I'd been invited to other people's tables. As a mother, as a guest, as a placeholder. Now, this one was mine. I'd pick the music. I'd set the plates. I'd pour the drinks and start the toasts. And I wouldn't apologize for the head seat anymore. That evening, I sat on the porch with a notepad and started writing names. People I wanted to invite. People I hadn't spoken to in years. Some who had slipped away when things got hard. Some who I suspected didn't even realize I was gone. Not a grudge list, a grace list. Because I wasn't rebuilding my life out of revenge. I was building it out of reclamation. Naomi texted just before sunset. I ordered folding chairs. Hope you're ready. This is just the beginning. I smiled watching the sun drop behind the pines. Yeah, just the beginning. The folding chairs arrived in 3 neat stacks, each wrapped in plastic, and smelling faintly of factory air and sawdust. Naomi helped me set them up in the backyard, 12 in total, though we only expected 8 women. Always plan for more, she said, brushing dust off her jeans. You never know who might be brave enough to show up last minute. I stood back and looked at the makeshift circle we'd built, just lawn chairs, a string of solar lights draped between trees, and a plastic table from my garage, holding iced tea and a peach cobbler. Simple, but it felt like something sacred. By 6 o'clock, they started arriving, one by one. Women who'd watched my interview or caught the seminar replay or read between the lines of my story and whispered me too to themselves. Gina came first, a retired librarian with silver bangs and sharp eyes. Her daughter had taken over her finances after a fall she claimed was suspicious. Then came Margaret, yes, another one who hadn't seen her grandchildren in 3 years because she refused to sign over her home. And Linda, who quietly confessed over a glass of iced tea, my son put a camera in my kitchen without telling me, said it was for safety. But I stopped cooking after that. By nightfall, all 8 chairs were full. No one talked over each other. No one postured or preached. We just shared stories, truths, small defiant acts. I changed my will, one woman said softly. I took my name off the joint account, said another. I moved to an apartment with a doorman. My son still doesn't know where I live. We weren't plotting revenge. We were reclaiming space. And somewhere between the laughter and the spoonfuls of cobbler, I realized what we were really doing wasn't healing, it was remembering. That we had names before we were mom or grandma or burden. That we had dreams before the ones we loved started making us feel like we'd outlived our usefulness. That we could still dream now. I'm thinking of getting a dog, I admitted halfway through the night. Everyone smiled. Do it, said Gina. Get one that barks loud and sleeps on your bed. I want to go to Maine, said Linda. Eat lobster by the water like I saw in that movie. The casual bravery in the room could have cracked concrete. We talked until the citronella candles burned low and the stars began to peek out like curious onlookers. Naomi stood at the end and raised her glass of sweet tea. To the women who weren't invited to the table, so we built our own. We clinked plastic cups. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I felt powerful. After everyone left and I washed the dishes in the quiet hum of the kitchen, I opened my email to find a message from Aaron. Subject line update on the investigation. I clicked it open, heart steady. Elaine the Day has officially filed charges. Derek's indictment is public record as of this morning. Wire fraud, forgery, misuse of identity. Below it, a link. I clicked. There it was, my son's name. A full write-up. Dayton man indicted on multiple counts of financial fraud after allegedly exploiting elderly family member. Sources suggest pattern of coercion, false power of attorney filings, and forged financial documents. They didn't name me, but I knew who I was in that story. I stared at the article for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just still. Like a puzzle had finally been finished and laid out on the table for the world to see. This was the truth. It didn't fix everything. It didn't rewind time. But it mattered, and it was mine. I replied to Aaron, "Thank you. I'm ready." I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, but from thought. I kept replaying moments in my head, small ones. The time I let Derek borrow my car even after he dented it. The afternoon he stood me up for lunch, and I made excuses to my neighbor about his busy work schedule. The night I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching a birthday card he never sent. All those red flags I'd painted white. All that love I gave with no return address. But here's the thing. Just because someone's your child doesn't mean they're your legacy. Sometimes what you leave behind is the strength you found after they left. The next morning, I made blueberry pancakes. Not for Derek, not for a holiday. For me. Because I liked them. Because I wanted them. Because I could. I ate them on the porch with the sunlight curling around my shoulders and the quiet hum of the world carrying on. And I knew the worst was behind me. But the best, that part was still mine to build. The week after the indictment, my front yard turned into a kind of quiet monument. Not in any official way, there were no reporters camped out, no television crews angling for footage, but in something softer, more personal. Cards began arriving. Handwritten notes from strangers, from women, mostly who had seen some version of themselves in my story. Some wrote paragraphs, some just scribbled their names with a simple "thank you for telling the truth." I stacked them in a little basket by the fireplace. It filled quickly. Naomi stopped by one morning with a box of homemade biscuits and a flyer. "What's this?" I asked, taking it from her. She grinned. "Community Center's having a speaker series. Thought you might want a headline." I blinked. "Me? You've been through hell and told the story with grace. People listen to you, Elaine." I looked at the flyer, redefining power stories from survivors. I hesitated. I'd spent most of my life avoiding stages. I liked the back row, the edges, the behind-the-scenes kind of quiet. But maybe that was part of the problem. I wasn't behind the scenes anymore. I was the story. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." The night of the event, I wore the soft blue blouse I'd always saved for holidays. Naomi met me in the parking lot with that nervous energy that made me feel like we were teenagers, about to do something mildly illegal. We walked into a room filled with about 50 people. Some I knew Bonnie from the post office, a few of the women from the backyard dinner, but most were new faces, curious ones. The director of the center introduced me. "Elaine Harper," she said, "is here to talk not just about what happened to her, but about what happens to so many others in silence." I stepped up to the podium. The mic squeaked. I smiled and tapped my notes gently. "Good evening," I began. "I used to think survival meant keeping quiet, getting through, making peace. But now I think survival means telling the truth, even when it's messy, even when it makes people uncomfortable." The room leaned in. "I'm not here tonight to make anyone a villain or a victim. I'm here to show you what it looks like when someone reclaims their name." I told them everything. The birthday, the suitcase, the facility, the silence. The fire that began as a flicker and turned into a full-blown storm. And then I told them what came after. The trust, the porch dinners, the women who dared to say no more. The applause at the end wasn't thunderous, it was quiet, steady, like a heartbeat. And it stayed with me longer than I expected. Afterward, a woman in her 30s approached me. She looked nervous but determined. "My dad has early signs of dementia," she said. "My brother's already talking about putting him in a home," without asking. I didn't know how to stop it. But now, I think I do. I squeezed her hand. "Ask your dad what he wants, then fight like hell for it." She nodded, eyes glassy. That night, back home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a new page in my notebook. At the top, I wrote, "What comes next?" Below that, I listed 3 things. Expand the Harper Trust, hire 2 part-time staff, launch the newsletter, The Second Act, take a vacation, somewhere near the ocean. Naomi had been on me about that last one for weeks. "You need to breathe, Elaine," she'd said. Really breathe. Salt air, sunrise, barefoot kind of breathing. I circled number 3 twice. Maybe Maine, maybe Charleston. Maybe somewhere I could sit in a rocking chair on a porch that wasn't mine and let the waves remind me that nothing lasts, not pain, not betrayal, not even fear. Just then, the porch light flickered. I rose to check it flipping the switch off and on, but it stayed dim. The bulb needed replacing. I reached up, unscrewed the old one, and twisted in the new. Bright, warm, steady. I stepped back inside and smiled. That light, that was me now. No longer flickering. No longer waiting. just shining without asking permission. I booked the trip on a Wednesday. No hesitation. No weighing the pros and cons. I just opened the laptop, clicked through a few tabs, and found a little inn on the coast of Maine, Camden to be exact. Room with an ocean view, homemade breakfast, no TV, just gulls, wine, and salt. It felt like something I'd always promised myself quietly in those long-ago days when Derek was still small, and I thought sacrifices were the cost of motherhood. But this time, I wasn't waiting for someone to give me permission. I packed light linen pants, a paperback, the soft scarf my husband gave me one Christmas back when gifts were chosen with care. No schedule, no grand expectations. Just the promise of walking along the harbor and sipping coffee without a ticking clock in my ear. The morning I left, Naomi drove me to the airport. "You sure you don't want me to tag along?" she joked. Tempting, I smiled, but I think I need to do this alone. She hugged me like someone who had become more than a friend, like a sister you meet later in life just when you need her most. The flight was smooth. I watched the clouds drift by like pages turning. When I arrived in Camden, the air was crisp and bright, the kind of clean that makes your lungs stretch wide. I checked into the inn, a cozy place with creaky floors and quilts on every bed. The owner, a silver-haired woman named Eleanor, gave me a key on a ribbon and said, "The best views at sunrise. You'll want to be up for it." That night, I sat on the porch in a rocking chair, mug and hand blanket on my lap. I could hear the waves just beyond the edge of the property, lapping like they had nowhere else to be. And for the first time in ages, I felt the same. The next morning, I did wake early, just as the sun peeled itself up from the horizon, painting the water in pink and gold. I didn't take a photo. Some things don't need proof. They just need presence. I spent that day walking, the harbor, the little shops, a bakery that smelled like warm cinnamon and butter. I bought myself a journal, not the lined kind, but one with blank pages, so I wouldn't feel pressured to stay between the lines. That afternoon, while sitting at a cafe with a clam chowder that made me question every other soup I'd ever had, I checked my phone. A single text from Aaron. He pled guilty. No ceremony, no court drama, no televised breakdown. Just a line. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. Derek Harper had finally run out of angles. Wire fraud, identity theft, elder exploitation. 10 years, no early release. And yet I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like a window finally washed free of smudges you'd stopped seeing years ago. I replied with just 2 words, "Thank you." I slipped the phone back into my purse and finished my chowder. There was no press release, no victory toast, no celebration waiting for me back at the inn. But there was a mirror in the hallway upstairs. And when I caught my reflection in it, something startled me. I looked steady, not tired, not broken, just real. Elaine Harper, survivor, speaker, builder of tables, and now woman on a seaside retreat who'd ordered pie just because she could. That night, I sat on the porch again. This time, I brought the journal. On the first page, I wrote, "You are not what was taken from you." Then, on the second, "You are what you made from the silence." I wrote until my hand cramped, until the sky turned dark and the ocean whispered like an old friend. And when I finally closed the journal, I felt something I hadn't felt since that first day in Willow Creek. A quiet joy. Not because of what I'd escaped, but because of what I was becoming. Back in Dayton, autumn had fully arrived. The maples burned red and orange along the sidewalks, the air crisp, in a way that made you pull your coat tighter, not from cold, but from memory. Coming home felt different this time. The house didn't seem as guarded as quiet. It greeted me like a friend who'd been watching over everything while I was gone. My neighbor Ruth waved from across the lawn as I stepped out of the taxi. "Elaine," she called. "Welcome back." I waved grateful. It's good to be home. And it was. Not because anything had changed physically, but because I had. There was no waiting for the other shoe to drop, no watching shadows for signs of Derek. He was gone in every way that mattered, serving his sentence, facing the life he tried to build from lies. I was free. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon. Naomi had stopped by while I was away, left a fresh loaf of banana bread and a stack of new books on the dining table. On top sat a handwritten card. for the woman who lit the match and then built the fire. Welcome back. I smiled and ran my fingers over the words. That evening, I lit a few candles and turned on a quiet jazz playlist. The house glowed softly, warm, and lived in. I made a cup of tea, settled into my favorite chair by the window, and opened my notebook again. This time, I started writing letters. Not for court, not for protection, for peace. One to my younger self, one to Richard, my late husband, and yes, one to Derek. I didn't write to forgive him. That wasn't something I owed. I wrote to release the last thread tying me to that version of myself, the woman who gave and gave until she disappeared. I kept it simple. You broke me, but I'm not broken anymore, and I don't need you to understand that. I just need to know it's true. Then I folded it, sealed it, and tucked it inside a box labeled unsent but finished. A few days later, the Harper Trust held its first in-person event at the local library. Naomi had organized everything: chairs, refreshments, speakers. I just had to show up and do what I'd learned to do best: speak the truth. We called the event Second Chances and First No's. About 30 people came, some in wheelchairs, some with canes, some younger women holding the hands of their aging mothers, all of them listening like their lives depended on it. And maybe, in a way, they did. I opened with a story not about Derek this time, but about pancakes. My son's favorite breakfast growing up, I said, was pancakes. I used to make them on Saturdays, even when I worked late the night before. Even when we couldn't afford syrup, he'd sit at the counter with his little feet swinging, waiting for that first fluffy bite like it was gold. I paused. And somewhere along the line, I stopped making pancakes. Not because I didn't love him anymore, but because he stopped seeing them as a gift and started expecting them like a debt. The room was still. Second chances, I said, aren't for the people who hurt us. They're for ourselves. To say I deserve better than a seat at the kids' table in my own life. Later, a woman approached me holding her purse tight. "My daughter won't let me touch my own money," she whispered. "Says I forget things." "I don't." I took her hand. "You don't need to prove that to me," I said. "But if you need help proving it to someone else, we've got a whole team now." Her eyes filled. She didn't speak, just nodded. That night, I stayed late to help Naomi pack up. We stood in the quiet library lobby under the buzzing fluorescent lights, sipping leftover punch. "You know," she said, "when you first told me about the lottery ticket, I thought it was going to be a story about revenge." I chuckled. "Me too." "But it's not," she said. "It's a story about reclamation." That word again, reclamation. I didn't take my life back. I claimed it maybe for the first time. And when I stepped outside into the cool night air, I looked up at the moon, round and full, hanging above Dayton like a promise. The worst had passed. The reckoning had come. And now, it was time to live. November rolled in, slow and moody the way it always does in Ohio. The skies turned the color of dishwater, and the wind carried with it a kind of soft warning: winter's coming. So gather what you need and make peace with what you don't. I leaned into the season gently this time. No hustle, no panic. I added thicker quilts to the beds, cinnamon sticks to the stovetop, and started wearing Richard's old wool cardigan around the house. It still smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave. Naomi and I hosted another backyard dinner, this time indoors. We moved the table into my den, added candles and old jelly jars, and served stew with cornbread and pear cobbler. No one dressed up. Some came in slippers. One woman brought her knitting and never once looked up, just smiled and nodded at all the right moments. We called it the Night of No Explanations. Because sometimes healing doesn't need words. Sometimes it just needs presence. After the last bowl was scraped clean, after the last goodbye hug lingered at the door, Naomi stayed behind. We sipped tea in the living room, the radio humming softly in the background. "I heard from the Department of Justice again," she said, curling her fingers around her mug. I turned slightly, listening. "They wanted to thank you. Said your file opened doors they didn't know existed. They're launching a task force, national, focused on financial abuse of seniors." I blinked. "Because of me?" "Because of your voice," she said, "and your evidence, but mostly your voice." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. A few days later, I received a certified letter. No return address, no markings, just my name in typed font. Inside a single page, a notice of Derek's transfer to federal prison. 10 years. Minimum of 6 before any possibility of release. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I set the letter on the table and went back to stirring soup. That evening, I fed the neighbor's cat, then sat on the porch and watched the sun go down behind the bare branches. I thought about the last 2 months. The silence of Willow Pines. The scratch of the lottery ticket. The drive across state lines with my heart in my throat and a duffel bag by my side. And I thought about how different the air feels when no one owns your choices but you. Later that night, I dug out an old photo album from the hallway closet, one of the few things I'd taken when I left the house that day. I flipped through the pages, baby Derek with cake on his cheeks, Richard holding him up on his shoulders, me in the background, always smiling, always holding something, a diaper bag, a casserole dish, a broken toy, always holding. I stopped on a picture from Derek's high school graduation. He was tall, handsome arms draped around 2 of his friends, and I was just to the side, cropped partially by the frame, clapping, smiling, faded. I looked at my own eyes in the picture, and I whispered, "You did your best." I closed the album. It no longer held power over me, just memory. That weekend, I received an email from a university in Indiana. Someone had read about the Harper Trust and wanted me to come speak to their social work students. Not a lecture, just a conversation. I said yes, not because I needed more attention, but because if one young person walked away knowing how to protect someone like me before it was too late, then it would be worth it. Before bed, I wrote another journal entry. No titles this time, just thoughts. Survival is a quiet kind of art. It doesn't look like running. It looks like staying still long enough to see clearly. Then moving, not because you're afraid, but because you finally believe you can. The pen felt steady in my hand. The words even steadier. This wasn't the ending. This was the soft unfolding of something entirely new. And I was here for all of it. Thanksgiving crept up on me like it always does, hidden behind stacks of grocery store flyers and overly cheerful radio jingles. But this year, I didn't dread it. I didn't brace myself for silence or pretend I wasn't aching when nobody called. This year, I made plans. Not a feast, not a performance. Just a small, chosen family gathered around a mismatched table in my living room, passing dishes and laughing like none of us had anything to prove. Naomi came early to help. She brought roasted vegetables, a pie with too much nutmeg, and a playlist of slow, sleepy jazz that made the house feel like it was wrapped in a warm scarf. I made turkey soup instead of a whole bird, more humble, but easier to eat with one hand while holding someone's story in the other. Gina and Margaret came too, cheeks flushed from the cold. They brought memories, old recipes, and one of those little chocolate turkeys wrapped in foil that no one actually eats but everyone smiles at. We toasted with cider, no speeches, just clinks of mugs and eyes that understood. Somewhere in the middle of the meal, Naomi looked at me across the table and said, "You know you built all this, right?" I paused, spoon halfway to my mouth. She gestured to the laughter, the lights, the warmth. None of this existed before you said no, before you said, "That's enough." You made this. I felt it then, the truth of it. Not like a firework, more like a gentle tide. I'd spent so long surviving that I'd forgotten what building felt like. And now here it was. After everyone left and the house grew quiet again, I stepped outside with a blanket around my shoulders and sat on the porch. The air smelled like leaves and wood smoke. The kind of smell that makes you feel like something has ended, but not in a bad way. In the way that lets you breathe deeper. My phone buzzed beside me. A single new message. From a number I didn't recognize, but I knew immediately who it was. "I know you'll never forgive me, but I hope someday you'll be able to forget what I did long enough to remember who I was before I became this." No name, no need. I stared at it a long time, then deleted it. Because forgetting wasn't the goal. And forgiveness, that wasn't mine to hand out like a trophy. What I had now was better. I had myself, whole, unapologetic, steady. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over 20 years. I painted. I set up an easel Naomi found at a thrift shop, poured a mug of coffee, and stood in front of a blank canvas with trembling hands and an open heart. The painting wasn't good, not technically. The lines were messy, the colors too soft, but it was mine. It looked like a sky about to snow. And in the corner, I added a single chair, not empty, waiting. By the time the first flakes began to fall that afternoon, the world had turned quiet again. But this time it wasn't the silence of erasure. It was the silence of arrival, of being home finally in your own life. And I knew if Derek's shadow ever tried to creep back in, if doubt whispered from behind old photos, if grief reached for me in the grocery store or in dreams, I would be ready. Not because I was bitter, but because I was whole. And no one, not a son, not a court, not a lie wrapped in love could take that from me again. Some stories end with fanfare, a triumphant chord, a door slamming shut, applause echoing in the background. But not mine. Mine ends like this. Soft light through the kitchen window, the slow hiss of a kettle, and a quiet house that finally feels like home. I don't know if healing ever truly finishes. I think it just changes shape, goes from sharp corners to something you can carry without it cutting into your palms. There are still mornings when I wake and reach for a version of the past that no longer fits. Still nights when I wonder how I didn't see the signs sooner. But I don't live there anymore. I visit. I nod. Then I return to now. Because now is enough. Now is tea steeping, paint drying letters half written to no one in particular. Now is new friends who never needed blood to feel like family. Now is the cat asleep on my lap, the porch light flicking on just before sunset, and the quiet hum of peace after too many years of survival. To anyone listening, if you've ever been erased, if you've ever been tucked into a corner and told to stay quiet for someone else's comfort, I see you. I hope you take up space again. I hope you write your name in the story you were told you didn't belong in. And I hope someday soon you sit at a table, your table surrounded by people who know your worth without needing a single explanation. That's the kind of ending I wish for all of us. One that isn't loud, but steady. One that doesn't beg, but simply exists. Like the quiet after snow, like the hush of a heart finally resting. Like your own voice, soft but certain, whispering back, I'm here, I made it, and I am enough.